Okay.
Alright, we're going to do treat everyone equal. My old pappy once told me a tale years ago about a cow camp he knew of in South Idaho with a camp cook that all of the cowboys called Wong. And although they was good boys, they treated him wrong. I suppose it was partly because of his race. He was different from them with his round yellow face and his brown almond eyes and his hair a pigtail. So they failed in the same way that most of us fail. In their minds they had classified him as a chink. But each man is a person, I can't help but think. Yet they'd drink of his coffee and wolf down his chow at the same time forgetting he's human somehow. So I asked my old pappy, now why should this be? And he says, I don't know, it's a mystery to me. I treat everyone equal, that's all I can say, and somehow I just know in the end it'll pay. To get on with the story, those cowboys had fun, and forever they had poor old Wong on the run. They would ride into camp, have a couple of shots, and then approach Wong amid his pans and his pots. And they'd pull on his pigtail and call him a fool. While he peeled the potatoes, they'd kick his wood stool out from under the feller and stand there and smirk. He'd pick himself up and go on with his work. Well, one night they was camped near a sizable town. It was peaceful and calm, and the herds settled down, and the moon's a full globe in the sky to the east as the boys ride to town for a real drinking feast. So they drank all the whiskey there was to be found, and they sported and gambled. The moon was still round when they headed for camp, but the moon's in the west, and none of those cowboys is feeling his best, because they all got to thinking about little old Wong and the ways that they'd treated the poor man so wrong. Now by this time they're off on a real crying jag, and appoint Jimmy Jones, half asleep on his nag, to awake little Wong when they get back to camp and apologize roundly. Their eyes are all damp as their spokesman wakes Wong, still a bit sleepy-eyed as he takes this strange turn of events in his stride. Now the tears are flowing from Jim's drunken eyes as he works out the best way to apologize to their new little friend that they now hold so dear. So old Jimmy says, Wong, we just want to make clear that from now on you're one of us. Keep it in mind that we won't never be nothing but kind. And we won't pull your pigtail or call you a fool or kick out from under you that wooden stool. Then says Wong, quite composed, I believe you, my friend, so I never pee-pee in the coffee again. Well, I've taken a page from my old pappy's book. Treat everyone equal, especially the cook. Spring cleanup. It was spring in the valley and time to clean up at the grange we belonged to when I was a pup. To elucidate some, just in case you don't know, the old grange was a power in our land long ago. It was composed all of farmers, their kids and their wives, and it brought some society into their lives, at the same time providing a place where they'd meet to discuss farmers' co-ops and cattle and wheat. Well, the day of spring cleanup arrived with a flare, and a busy good humor pervaded the air. As the women worked inside, as custom was then, all the yard work and such was performed by the men. Now, not only good humor pervaded the air, because the sturdy old back house provided its share. As a couple of sniffs from the leeward side proved, there was no other option. She had to be moved. So my dad called some fellers to come to his aid, and they formed themselves into an outhouse brigade. There was Dad and my brother and Earl and Ray. They are called the Privy Council to this very day. Well, they held a short conference. Then they stood back and decided upon a good plan of attack. They all knew that they needed to dig a new hole, and to move the thing over would be the next goal. So they found them some poles to put under each side, and they surveyed their handiwork, not without pride, thinking, once we have dug a new hole in the ground, we're going to lift on poles and just shift her around. So they started to dig. and the stories began, as can happen when men start to talk man to man. Each in turn would stretch out what he knew was the truth, and they outdid each other in being uncouth. So in words of one syllable, each took a turn to tell all the stories that he'd come to learn about crappers and related stuff of that kind, using all of the short words that came into mind. So they carried on that way while digging the pit that would lodge the outhouse when moved over a bit. What they didn't know then, but they learned later on, was that poor Mrs. Duncan was trapped in the job. Mrs. Duncan's a model of morality, and she's also as fat as a farm wife can be. She had gone to the outhouse to get some relief, and she sat there embarrassed beyond all belief. She had never heard language of that kind before, and there's no way she wanted to hear any more. But the men were still scurrying round and about, and there wasn't a graceful way to get out. Well, the hole is now dug, and it's come time to lift. So each man grabbed a pole, and they started to shift the old outhouse from where it had always had stood, and each one of them lifted more weight than he could. They were lifting and tugging, their muscles a-twitch, when Ray loudly announced, "She's a heavy old bitch." Well, with that, Mrs. Duncan dismounted and fled, and the men stood aghast at the things they had said. But 'twas Ray most of all who was counting his sins as his jaw slackened up and fell down toward his shins. And indeed a bleak future it was that he saw as he mumbled, "My God, it's my mother-in-law."